in episode 3, we sat down again with Chelsea Brown and just talked a little bit about some very practical ideas when it comes to mental health. So what are some practical ideas to even deal with our anxiety and our stress and our depressions, and how can we work through those things? What are some ways that we can even just, as a community, be better at this, and as a community help one another in those areas? And we even mentioned a few different resources, some books and some other podcasts that you can tune into as well. But this was just a great practical one. If you missed the first 2, make sure you go back and listen to the first 2 as well. This just brings everything into light and kind of lands in a great spot in this final episode. So enjoy.
Well, thanks for joining us for episode 3 of our podcast series on mental health to go along with our 800-pound gorilla series. You know, we're super excited, and I don't know about you, but even just if you've listened to the first 2 episodes, man, there's just been a wealth of knowledge and just great takeaways. And so if you haven't had a chance to listen to those yet, be sure to go back and listen to those because it just gives a great picture of where we're heading today. And today we're going to try to get real practical with just what we're talking about. And so, you know, we're going to jump in again. We have Chris here with us and Chelsea. And so super excited for our time together today. So just starting things off, right? We learned a lot of great things these past 2 episodes. You know, we learned about kind of the, just kind of definitions of mental health, what that all entails. You know, we looked at the mental health of the church. And so if I'm starting my mental health journey, or maybe I've been in a mental health journey, or I've been working on it for a little bit, and maybe I've gotten stuck, Chelsea, what's a great place to just start?
So I was really excited to get to the practical application side of this, because I feel like this is kind of where the rubber meets the road, where it's really fun to talk about kind of the ethereal, like, when I get to this pinnacle of mental health, then things will be good. But very rarely do you actually have people walking you through, like, this is how you could actually achieve that. So I'm pretty excited to talk about these things today. From a starting point, and I think we mentioned this maybe in the second episode, like, one of the biggest tools on anyone's tool belt is the ability to self-reflect. And essentially therapy is helping you to learn how to do that. But if you're not quite at the place where you're ready to get started with a therapist, or maybe it's like, hey, I just want to try the skills on first, I would say that the best thing to do is to kind of take that CBT triangle that we talked about and work backwards. So for quick review, your CBT triangle is that the way that you think influences the way that you feel, then influences the way that you behave. And the quickest, most practical way that I can explain how to do good self-reflection is to start with the behavior and work your way backwards. Almost always, that's how therapy works anyway. People will come in and are like, I yell at my kids all the time. That's what I'm doing, and that's what I want to stop doing. I want to stop doing this behavior. So it's like, okay, we have the behavior. Almost always, it's a pretty easy processing jump then once you've moved to behavior to move back to feeling. And feeling is essentially looking at, like, what was the thing that I was feeling that was making me yell? Well, that's easy, right? Like, I was angry. I was frustrated. It's really important. Counselors kind of force you, though, to talk about the difference between a primary and a secondary emotion. So secondary emotions are emotions that keep people back. So those are things like frustration, anger, disgust, apathy. Those are pushback emotions. Underneath them are really primary emotions that are more vulnerable. When I'm explaining them, I always describe them as being like squishier. So they're feelings of like hurt or inadequacy, helplessness, insignificance. And so a good counselor would take that scenario with the kids and say, okay, well, how did you feel? Frustrated? Sure. That's a good secondary emotion. What's underneath that? And you would probably get something like, insignificant or helpless. Like, people are treating, like, I don't feel treated well. I don't feel like I'm treated with value. I feel unimportant. I feel devalued. And it's like, okay, all right, now we're tracking. And then from that behavior to that feeling, a really qualified therapist would ask you, what is it that you're telling yourself that's making you feel that's getting you to that behavior? And almost always it's going to be something like, well, no one respects me around here. No one values me around here. You know, from there, from a Christian perspective, it's like, okay, well, it's time to make that thought obedient. It's time to take that thought captive, which means that you need to put it through the ringer. You need to make sure that it's accurate. You need to make sure that it's helpful. You know, to use the Philippians verse, you know, is it noble? Is it lovely? Is it praiseworthy? Like what is it actually making you feel equipped and powerful and connected to your source? Does it actually provide those benefits? If it doesn't, you might need to rearrange that thought. We call that cognitive challenging and refocusing. Are you actually moving that thought to a healthier place, which is something along the lines of, my children struggle to respect me because they're children, but God always values me and will bring good work to fruition in my children, which brings you peace and a place of acceptance. Maybe not like joy abounding, but in that moment, instead of yelling, you have the steering wheel of your emotions instead of the other way around. So, you know, and that's honestly what therapy, good therapy looks like week to week. You come in, you vent, you get it off your chest, and then a good therapist is going to say, okay, let's start working backwards until we get to where we can readjust that thought to get the feeling that you're shooting for, to get the behaviors that would make your life more purposeful and fruitful. So that self-reflection tool is the starting place for good cognitive mental health.
A follow-up, Chelsea,
Sure.
to that process. So you know, a person finds a good counselor, they're going to take them through that reverse triangle process, right? If someone, you know, doesn't go to counseling, you know, is there, or, you know, whether they don't want to, they don't think they need to, whatever the reason, is there some good, just practical mental care around that triangle that you would encourage people to do just in their self-reflection? Or is it the same thing, taking your behavior, tying it to your feeling back into your thoughts and trying to get there?
It's really the same thing. The problem is that it's so hard, and we're going to, you know, I think we're going to touch on this a little bit more here in just a bit. It's so hard to do that alone. And it's so hard to do that apart from other types of health. So it's hard to do that when your nutrition is not good and you're not sleeping well, and you haven't bathed. Like more often than not, when teenagers come in, it's like we can't even work backwards to those thoughts because they're falling asleep in my office and they're hangry. And it's like, okay, well, you're not even physically taking care of yourself. And mental health is one piece of overall health. So it's like if it's almost like whenever you have a migraine, it's like you can't really focus on anything outside of that. You almost have to kind of triage, like, okay, I need to take care of my physical health. I need to make sure that I'm not, you know, in the trenches of like the worst possible case scenarios. I need to establish safety and physical wellness. And then from there, you're able to do that. So sometimes the first thing that we do when somebody comes through to us is, I'm going to need you to take, before you see me again, I'm going to need you to take a shower. I'm going to need you to eat at least 2 meals a day. And I really need you to practice these sleep hygiene tips. And everybody gets ticked, right? Because they're like, no, I want my anxiety to stop. And it's like, right, we'll get there. You physically need rest. You need to do that before we can have that conversation. So I guess maybe those are the two pieces that I would say. The process for your mental health is still the same. That's what that's going to look like with any really good, competent therapist. That's what you're going to have to do on your own when you're away from therapy. But also keep in mind that you need social health. You need relational health. You need physical health. And that's why you'll have a lot of therapists say things like self-care and rest and all of these other pieces, because you need both to be able to function well.
Yeah. And I just look back, the very first thing you said, I just want to capitalize on it. You can't do it alone. I mean, that was the first thing. And I just think that's ultimately what we all need to hear is like, we think we can, you know, we want to, whatever, but at the end of the day, we do need each other. And that's why great counselors are helping so many people get unstuck from a cycle that just has them stuck. But we just have to come to that point of we just can't do it all ourselves.
For sure.
And, you know, so, well, let's jump into this question, which ties into what you just shared. You know, what are some ways we can kind of confront, you know, the anxiety, the stress, depression? You know, there's some of those big buzzwords, you know, in our lives. What can we do to actually, you know, face them and do something about them?
So there's two pieces, and one I'll run through really quickly. First, just understand this is a natural mechanism. This is your body responding to threat or perceived threat. And so if you didn't get a chance, now I get to plug. If you didn't get to see the first sermon series where there's a wonderful moment where there's a brain up on the screen and it's explaining to you that this is a God-designed reflex. So this is a normal response. It's just gotten hijacked. So, downplay the shame-based messaging that like, I'm ruined because I'm anxious, or I'm bad because I'm anxious. These are really normal reactions that a lot of people deal with. So that's for starters. But second, just to go back to kind of my answer to the first question, take into consideration how much work that actually is to look at your thought life and examine your feelings, examine your behaviors, examine your thoughts, realign them, refocus them, make them like it's long. It's not the thought like my children struggle to respect me because they are children, but God always value, like that is lengthy. Like that takes a lot of work. It doesn't have quite the same satisfying thump that like no one cares about me does. Like, I mean, you have to understand that like unhealthy practices are almost always simple and easy. They're the fast food. It's an Oreo as opposed to a meal. So like angry reactions are quick and easy and they feel good. And that should be a red flag. If it's easy and it feels good, that should really be an emotional red flag for you. So like speaking in anger, getting a like on Instagram or Facebook, like that is a quick, easy feel good. And that should be a red flag to you. Because real mental health is nuanced. It's slow. It's a slow cooker, not a microwave. Like there's a lot of work that goes into those healthy practices. So healthy is the long game. Knee-jerk reactions are not. So just make sure that you're giving yourself enough patience and grace to be a work in progress. That would be my other portion. Find you a good therapist, find you wise counsel. All of those things, though, are going to take time to kind of glean out a good therapist, to glean out wise counsel, to have time built into your schedule for self-reflection. Those are slow cooker things. Just make sure you understand that like that's not going to happen overnight. Really invest in the things that last.
Yeah, that's really good. I think, go ahead, Chris.
Oh, you were going to say something smart. All I was going to say is you mentioned Oreos. And double stuffed Oreos are a great immediate response to all.
Who is letting the Walmart cashier have it? Like it feels good. It
right,
does.
Right, it does.
It's good, yeah. But it's not long term good.
Right. So you have to quit eating so many Oreos now, Chris.
I can't have them.
Sorry.
No, seriously. But see here, this ties in. Actually, that's why I just never have them in the house. Yeah, right. I just never have like double stuff. The regular Oreos, not the issue for me. The double stuff. So it's like banned from my house. And if people buy me some because they know I love them, great. I'll receive that, but then I'll take it to a staff meeting. I'll take it to another meeting. Let other people eat all of them. So,
and we enjoy that.
Yeah. See, it's a gift.
I think that speaks to mental health issues as well. I mean, it really does. It's like put the good stuff in proximity, put the wise counsel on your speed dial, put in place the things that are maybe hard to do, but increase the proximity, move the stuff that's easy away, put the Grand Theft Auto somewhere else. You know what I'm saying? Like put it somewhere else just for this season while you're working on developing yourself. Put a little proximity between you and the quick, fast, easy stuff. That's probably not doing you any long-term favors. I think that's a great analogy.
And I one more step, because I think that's so practical. It's like if you're dealing with, I talked about in part 2, different, how we escape, sometimes, or how we escape, and then I went to isolate. But, some of that is like scrolling, people just mentally escaping, right? And maybe you need to remove Instagram, TikTok, Facebook from your phone. So you can't just easily grab it and find yourself there again, right? Just removing that app for 30 days, taking a break for your mental health, I think is so important. Or if someone is using alcohol, just remove it from your house, box it up, give it to someone who's not using that for an escape. I just think that very specific, tangible action to say, I'm going to choose to remove this from my proximity. If not, because we all want to think we have self-control, but when it comes to moments of life where we're running, we don't. And
trash the Oreos, trash them, put them in the dumpster. Just for a little bit.
No.
That's so good. So yeah, so even in that, right? Like, the theme is definitely like, have that wise counsel on speed dial. Have somebody in your life, right, that can continue to encourage you. I think when we come to think about practically, right, we mentioned it already earlier, like, we can't do this alone. That's why you've been at TCC. We offer life groups and all these places where people can plug in so they know they're not alone in their journey. So like just practically even thinking, as a church community, one, how can a church community be beneficial? Like maybe even the people within it that you're connecting with, maybe it's even just being involved in community. How can that be beneficial to our mental health? And then in the same breath of that, even, how can people within our churches help one another as they journey together?
Okay. So to answer the first part, and then I promise I'll make a smooth transition to the second one. To answer the first part, no one fights this fight alone and wins. That's just kind of one of those things. And I hate to put that in like, I'm sitting here wondering, like, out of the hundreds of clients that I've helped, has there ever been somebody who just like did it on their own? And it's like, well, no, because they came to see me. So no, like, it's just kind of one of those things that, like, without outside perspective, if you're already in it, you're probably on your way downhill, not uphill. And you really need those supports in place to kind of help you do those things. And I completely can respect how people will say, like, well, other people have hurt me. And so I don't want to rely on anyone else. But the truth is that those people were going through their own things too. And in order for you to not become a person who wounds other people, you need to do the work that person didn't do. The person who hurt you didn't do the work. And so it's all the more important that you do the work with people who are discerning and kind and committed and compassionate and for you and for your purpose. You really do need that. So community is everything. I don't know what I would do without a like-minded group of healthy people who are encouraging me daily, which is essentially what a church is supposed to be. Now, not everybody in a church necessarily is on that same kind of healthy tangent. So that's a given. Definitely use discernment, pray about who you think that circle should be. But a good rule of thumb, where you see other people thriving in the areas that you would like to thrive, buddy up to them. I would be nothing without other older moms who came along and were like, hey, here's what I do when my temper is high, or here's what I do when I get overwhelmed with the amount of things. Like, seek those people who are really doing well and thriving in the areas where you want to thrive. People who seem to have a good source of peace. If you're an anxious person, ask them how they do that, what they do, what their practices, their rhythms are. I would ask them to do that. Then to move over to the second question, like, if I'm in a church and I feel like I'm doing fairly well, and I know that there are other people around me who are struggling, how can I be helpful? I think was kind of your second question about that, right? Rule of thumb, be safe, be kind, and be honest. A good therapist practices that. Wise counsel, that's what that looks like. Be safe. For another person to talk to, be a good voice of compassion that would make you safe. Be kind, but be honest. A really good friend does not hold somebody accountable to the things that would make them better. So there is a time where you have to be able to speak truth to people. Just make sure you're doing it in love. Make sure you're communicating to other people from a place of love and wanting what's best for them. But don't be afraid to move that towards, but I think that you need to change here. I think this would be good for you. I feel like these things would be good. Even therapists, any good therapist is also doing that, holding somebody accountable to take those steps that are good for them. So be safe, be kind, but be honest. The only other thing that I would add to that, and this, if we end up having a request for this, I will absolutely cover this way more in depth at another time. But God is a God of boundaries too. And it's possible that you are being perfectly kind and perfectly safe and perfectly honest, and you have people that are just sucking the life out of you. And so you need to keep up with that as well, that there is a time and there is a very compassionate way to set boundaries with other people in a way that is still scripturally sound and implies the right messaging about who God is. So if there's ever a time where somebody reaches out and is like, I'd like to know what that is, like I'll for the purposes of this podcast, I'm not going to dive into it. But if we get enough response that people want to hear that conversation, I would be happy to have that conversation. But just know that God is a God of boundaries. He knows that we are not perfect people. We don't have an endless capacity to give at all times to all people in all seasons. That's why there's Sabbath. There's all kinds of boundaries that are already put into place for us because we have limitations. So again, if anybody has any more questions on that, we'll figure it out. But just understand that there is a time too where you, as much as you want to be kind and safe and honest with as many people as you possibly can, I bet you money God has put a couple of people in front of you. Don't confuse that with hundreds of people or every person. God will usually put a special calling on your heart when you're like, that one's mine. This is mine. This is a person I need to do this with. Don't confuse that with being all things for all people at all times. Yeah, so there's that.
Well, and you know, the follow-up thought, because I'm with you, the boundary conversation, especially in the Christian circles, right? We're to love everyone. And one of the things I shared in part 2 was, you know, Paul's words in Galatians 6, you know, carry each other's burdens. But he doesn't stop there. He goes, but you should carry your own load. And I just think so many times, you know, we don't stop to go, well, but is that what I should carry from that person? And or I'm putting my load that I need to carry on someone else, right? It's a both and that really gets into boundaries. It's like, there's some stuff like for me personally, like Chris Truckley just has to carry, and I shouldn't put that on anyone else. That's mine to carry. And so, yeah, that boundary conversation, I think, would just be super insightful and helpful. But you're right.
Maybe we'll do a follow-up if enough people are like, yeah, how do we do that? We can totally piece that thing out. I promise.
Yeah.
Cool.
So what are some practical just tools, you know, where there's books, resources, like this podcast is a great resource. What are some tools that you would recommend for people to maybe step into, look at, read, engage with?
So again, I'm a preface type girl because for every statement that I make, there's going to be somebody that's like, boo, I don't like that. Like, find your flavor. If it speaks to you and that's what you need for that season, by all means, I'm going to give you my favorites. So Attacking Anxiety by Sean Johnson is a fantastic book. It's really good from a Christian perspective, and no offense to church or church people, but every time I read a lot of books, like I read an insane amount of books, and there is a tendency for Christian books to kind of leave out some of the basics of what we know in mental health. And this book by Sean Johnson, Attacking Anxiety, doesn't do that. It really incorporates a lot of CBT principles into it. I was reading it and I was like, yes, yes, this is so good. So that's a really good one. Deeply Formed Life by Rich Viotis has a lot in there about healthy rhythms that are spiritually based, and it's great. I really appreciate that book from a mental health.
Yeah, I can second that one. That one is a great book.
Yay! Oh, see, like if we were close, I would like high five you through the screen.
We can do a virtual five.
Of Rich Viotis. Winning the War in Your Mind, Craig Rochelle. It's incredibly reader friendly. It's new, so it's kind of pricey. But a lot of his podcasts and sermons and stuff are taken from that. So that would be another area that I would say there's some really good stuff in there. As far as podcasts go, it's probably my favorite podcast. I will warn people it's a smidgen dry, but it's probably my favorite podcast is Emotionally Healthy Leadership by Pete Scazzaro. It's really designed for church leadership, but I am not a church leader, and I find it so helpful for helping to unpack like really heavy concepts that even trip me as a therapist up. I really love that podcast a lot. And it full send the content in it. And then if you want something a little on the lighter side with a little bit more zing, a little bit more flavor, Your Move by Andy Stanley is a great podcast. It's got a lot in there about mental health, relationships, and it's so palatable. I have a client that would say it's lickable. Like it's an easy thing to digest. Yeah, it's lickable. It's something you'd want to come back to over and over again. Not every episode of that is mental health friendly, but there are mental health nuggets kind of throughout the whole thing. And then of course, Andy Stanley is like the king of like cute, kitschy phrases, stuff that sticks. So any of those, I would be full send. I think those are really helpful add-ons to kind of help you do your journey as you're going through it.
Cool. Those are awesome. Yeah. And I know I've read several of those. I remember in some of my seminary classes, like Pete Scaterzo, how you say his last name, he was like required reading for us, right? Like we had to, as we were going through, I think pastoral care and counseling, be like, hey, you need to read books so you can be a healthy person. So yeah, no, I think those are all great. And Chris, you know Andy, just call him up and be like, you don't really know.
Yeah, I have him on speed dial.
I would have Andy Stanley on speed dial. He's my make-a-wish. Like he's my dying wish. I just want to spend a couple hours just talking to him about like how he comes up with his like phrasing. It's just, I would love to spend a couple of hours talking to him one of these days. So if you've got the hookup, I may hold you to that at some point.
Yeah, cool. So as we wrap up, the kind of last question, what's some encouragement that you would give to folks that are either they're just starting out on a mental health journey, maybe they're just kind of realizing like, hey, yeah, I need to take a step into this. I need to go see a therapist, or maybe someone who's just continuing on. Just some encouraging words that you would say, man, you whether it's you can do it or whatever it is. What's some encouraging insights that you would give to those folks?
Oh man, you aren't alone. I feel like that's one of the lies that gets stuck in people's head the most, is just this concept that I'm out here doing this all by myself. And that's not true. Not only are there a lot of people who are struggling alongside you that are in this same sort of uphill climb that you're in, but also there's so many people who have been there, who would love to come alongside you and help you through it. There are a lot of people that are available. It's just one of the lies of depression and anxiety is that I have to do this on my own. And that's just not true. Like I can full send tell you that is not a true statement. That's just not true. You do need people, and there are people who want to walk this journey with you. The other thing that I'll put a disclaimer on, because I don't want to in any way communicate that like God gives us things, God causes a lot of the instances of pain that we're in. I'm not trying to communicate that, but I would communicate from a hopeful place that doubting, struggle, what Pete Scazzaro would call kind of dark nights of the soul, those are part of sharpening faith. Those are moments where you can see roots taking deep in people if they will lean into the healthy and not out of it. If you'll lean in, if you'll make an appointment with that therapist, if you'll self-reflect, if you'll surround yourself with community, if you'll practice rhythms that are healthy, those are times where your roots really will go down ridiculously deep. So I do a lot of trauma work, and of course, everybody is pretty familiar with PTSD, but not a lot of people are familiar with what we call PTG, which is post-traumatic growth, where we have people that once they're on the other side of treatment have deep empathy bones. I mean, deeper than your average person. They have an ability to feel with people in a way that you don't see in an average person, or they have an ability to grab their thoughts and make them captive on like an instinct. I mean, the wisdom that pours out of these people because they're constantly self-reflecting. They're constantly checking their brain because they have to, because their brain, they know their brain is prone to anxiety. They know that their brain is prone to worst case scenario thinking. And so they are constantly vigilant on their brain, intentional in how they're thinking all the time, which makes them so wise. They're almost the Abraham Lincoln in the room, that they'll step back and analyze what's being said and what they're telling themselves. And they don't speak until they have something profound to say. because they're so disciplined in their thoughts. And that, I think, speaks to how God can use these sort of struggles in these moments. So I want to speak hope to anybody that's watching this, that if you'll lean into healthy, God leans right back. He'll pull you through these seasons in a way where your purpose becomes clearer and larger. So I just wanted to be a person that can tell you from experience. I've watched so many people do it. So and they would tell you, if it worked for me, it'll work for you. Lean into those healthy practices, walk through the church doors, even though it overwhelms you, reach out to people, join a life group, put those daily rhythms into practice, and go to therapy. Take the steps, lean into those healthy things, and watch God do anything.
That's good. Well, awesome, man. I know, even just knowing that is encouraging, because I know Chris could relate to this. I know sometimes, even in our world, it's just like we're just out here on this island sometimes, especially, well, even Chelsea would too. Like, as soon as you start in that capacity of like helping people, right? You always feel like you're the one helping and not having community with you, but being intentional about that's so important. So awesome. Well, Chris and Chelsea, thanks for your time. Man, I just took copious amounts of notes in my head, and I'll probably write them down when I'm done. But man, thank you guys for your time. This has been so insightful. I hope those who have listening and who tuned in the past couple episodes, that you have been encouraged and challenged in many ways. And just know you're not alone. We're here for you guys. So until next time, if there is a next time, we'll talk to you guys later.